December 15th, 2025, Buddhadhamma, Chapter 8, Point 3, Important Principles on Realization of Nibbāna. Now here are some following questions that are posed by Buddhist scholars and practitioners. The first question is, can someone who only practices vipassana, insight, meditation, attain arihatship without practicing tranquility meditation, samatha meditation? Is it necessary to attain concentration, absorption, and jhana before obtaining Nibbāna? Or to achieve the 6 kinds of higher psychic attainments of abhiññā, is it sufficient to have attained the 4th jhana? Or one must also attain the formless jhanas? To attain the knowledge of the destruction of the asavakaya nana and realize Nibbāna, must one have previously attained the reminiscence of past lives and the knowledge of the decrease of rebirths of beings? While in jhana, can one practice insight and contemplate conditioned phenomenon, or must one first emerge from jhana? Is it possible to develop samatha further and achieve concentration of attainments after attaining path and fruit of magga and phala? Some of these questions involve key aspects of realizing Nibbāna. Some are only tangentially related, and some have already been discussed as linked, especially the question on whether a person can attain Nibbāna by solely practicing insight meditation, vipassana. This section will focus on those questions which are directly related to realization, drawn upon evidence from the Dipitaka and other Pali canons. I declare, O monks, that the destruction of asavas occurs in dependence on the 1st jhana, or the 2nd jhana, the 3rd jhana, and 4th jhana, in dependence on these base of infinity of space, or the base of infinity of consciousness, or the base of nothingness, or the base of neither perception, sanya, nor non-sanya perception, or independence of the cessation of perception and feeling. This sutra and 3 other sutras describe the way to use each stage of concentrative attainment for reflection to gain insight into the true nature of conditioned phenomenon. The above sutra continues. When it is said, I declare, O monks, that the destruction of taints occurs in dependence of the 1st jhana, for what reason is this said? Here a monk enters and dwells in the 1st concentrative absorption. Whatever states are included there comprised by form, by feeling, by perception, volitional formation, or consciousness, he views those states as impermanent, as subject to dukkha, as empty, as not self. Having viewed them thus, his mind then turns away from those states and focuses upon the deathless element. This is the peaceful state, is sublime, the peaceful abiding, that is Nibbāna. If he sustains the 1st jhana, he attains the destruction of taints. But if he does not attain the destruction of taints, because of delight in the Dhamma, then he is due to spontaneously be reborn in the celestial realms and there attain final Nibbāna without ever returning from that world. Now, if he sustains the 1st jhana, this is translated from Pali, so tata tito. It explains that if he sustains the 1st jhana, or each of the successive concentration absorptions, he develops strong insight and realizes arihatship. Another definition is he sustains insight with the three characteristics, tilakkhana, as the objects of meditation. He sustains samatha and vipassana. Now, without ever returning the world, this is describing an anagami. He or she is a non-returner. That's the third stage before Arihatya. Now, from the sutra above, describe a similar process of cultivating insight to reach the destruction of taints for each of the concentration levels, all the way up to the sphere of nothingness. Thus, this is included in the four fine material concentration absorptions and the first three immaterial concentration absorptions. So the first three jhanas are immaterial, while the fourth jhana is fine material, a sphere of nothingness. The Mahamula Lunkaya Sutra has less details, but describes the contemplation of three characteristics, tilakkhana, anicca, dukkha, anatta, in the reference of the five skandha in each of the jhanas up to the sphere of nothingness, resulting in the destruction of asavas, the taints. The Atthakhanakara and the Dasana Sutra have a slight variation. A monk enters and abides in the first jhana. He considers this and understands it. Thus, the first concentration of absorption is conditioned and volitionally produced. But whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent, subject to cessation. Sustaining that first concentration absorption, he attains the destruction of the asavas, the taints. These sutras, the liberation of mind through loving kindness, contemplation, appreciative joy, and equanimity, the four Brahma Viharas, are inserted between the fine material jhanas and the formless jhanas, abiding four more concentrated attainment for contemplations. These four sutras contain essentially the same information. They differ only in minor details. They describe the development of insight into jhana, from the first jhana to the fear of nothingness, ending in the destruction of taints. The Jhana Sutra, however, adds a summary. Thus, monk, there is a penetration to final knowledge, anya pativeta, as far as meditation of attainments accompanied by perception, sanya samapati, that is reached. This means that in the first concentration of absorption, or in concentrated absorption jhana, from the sphere of nothingness and below, there is a perception, along with other accompanying aggregates which can be applied for contemplation and supports insight for the realization of the destruction of asavas in the spheres of neither perception nor non-perception. Neva sanya na sanya yatana. Ayatana. Yeah. Neva sanya na sanya ayatana. Perception is too refined, cannot be applied for contemplation. This holds even more true in the extinction of perception and feeling. Sanya veta niya nirota. Therefore, these two attainments are not attainments accompanied by sanya samadhi. If it is so, how is it possible to attain the destruction of taints while in the sphere of neither perception or non-perception, in the extinction of perception and feeling? The answer is that one must first exit the highest levels of concentration of attainments and then apply wisdom to contemplate conditioned phenomena to reach the destruction of taints. The Anupatta Sutra contains a passage concerning the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Again, monks, I completely surmounting the base of nothingness, Sariputra entered upon and abode in the base of neither perception or non-perception. He emerged mindful from that attainment. Having done so, he contemplated the past states, which has ceased and changed. So indeed these states, not having been, come into being. Having been, they vanish. Compare this with the description of contemplating conditioned phenomena while in the sphere of nothingness and while in the lower jhanas, the lower three, in which there is no mention of exiting the concentrative absorption. For example, in the above sutra, it says, again, bhikkhus, by completely surmounting the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, Sariputra, entered and abide in the base of nothingness. And at that state of the base of nothingness, the perception of base of nothingness, the unification of the mind, the contact, the feeling, the perception, the volitional formation and consciousness, the zeal, determination, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were known to him by one as they occurred, known to him by those states that arose, known as they were present, known as they disappeared. He understood thus. So indeed, these states, not having been, come into being. Having been, they vanish. The Kula de Nibbāna, a secondary text, explains the contemplation of the sphere of neither perception or non-perception in a similar way into the Majjhima Nikaya above. He entered upon and abided in the base of neither perception or non-perception. Having emerged from that attainment, he regarded, examined, reflected on, investigated the mind and the mental constitute arising that attainment is as impermanent, subject to stress, not self, not free. An examination of the original text, however, reveals that the phrase base of neither sanya nor non-sanya here is an error. It should read the sphere of nothingness, as confirmed by the commentaries. The second and latter text originally described the contemplation of conditioned phenomenon and the development of insight after emerging from the concentration attainments, irrespective of how high or low these attainments are. So basically, after a person that came out of concentration absorption, either any of those jhanas, the person develops vipassana. Similar explanation are given in reference in the extinction of sanya and feeling. Sanya veta nita nirota. Having emerged from this attainment, a person contemplates the fine material qualities of the states, contemplates the qualities in preceding states of neither perception nor non-perception, or contemplates all conditioned phenomena to understand satya, the truth, and reach the destruction of the asavas, the taints. In similar fashion, one can contemplate conditioned phenomenon or the material constitutes of concentration absorption after emerging from each of the jhanas, from the sphere of nothingness down to the first jhana. Now, emerging from the jhanas here corresponds with the commentary explanation of accessing the states of mind empowered by specific attainments. Like one does not use jhana as a foundation. The passages above are provided, however, to prove that it is also possible to develop insight while abiding in these states of jhana without first emerging from them. Only with the two highest concentration of attainments of neither perception nor non-perception and the extinction of perception and feeling. One must first exit in order to develop insight. Whether one can develop vipassana in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception is further discussed. The commentaries refer to one who practices in the way as one who uses tranquility as a vehicle. Samatha yanika. Such a practitioner practices tranquility until it reaches jhana, at which point he or she develops insight. This is the first way to practice in the group of four, which is mentioned in the scriptures. Samatha Buddhadhamma vipassana bhavana. The practice of insight preceded by tranquility. Vipassanupapagama samatha bhavana. The practice of tranquility preceded by insight. Yugata sata samatha vipassananupavana. The practice of tranquility and insight in association. Dhamma da cha vikahita manasa. The way of practice in the mind is distorted or misled by excitement, agitation, and regard to the eternal law of Dharma. Here, one has misapprehension that the intermediate results of one practice constitute the path, fruit, and Nibbāna. The four ways of practice, or summary, are the four pathways of Magga described by Venerable Ananta. Friends, whatever bhikkhu or bhikkhuni has declared an attainment of arhatship in my presence has done so by the four paths, or by a certain one among them. What for? Here, friend, a monk develops insight preceded by tranquility. While he develops insight preceded by tranquility, the path arises in him. He now pursues, develops, and cultivates the path, and while he is doing so, the fetters are abandoned and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. Again, friends, a monk develops tranquility preceded by insight. While he develops tranquility preceded by insight, the path arises in him. He now pursues, develops, cultivates that path, and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. Again, friend, a monk develops tranquility and insight in tandem at the same time. While he thus develops tranquility and insight, so he develops samatha and vipassana at the same time, the path that arises in him, he now pursues and develops, cultivates that path, and the underlying tendency are uprooted. Or again, friends, a monk's mind is seized by agitation, caused by higher states of mind. But there comes a time when his mind becomes internally steady, composed, unified, and concentrated. Then the path arises in him. He now pursues, develops, cultivates the path, and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. Insight preceded by tranquility. So the Patisampati defines thus: initially, the mind is at one pointed, or is one pointed, steady and concentrated. This concentration can arise from any of these causes: the power of renunciation, nekkhamma, or the power of freedom of ill will, apaya, or the perception of insight, aloka sanya, which combats drowsiness and an absence of restlessness. Reflection on the aspects of Dhamma, which dispel doubt. Knowledge, joy, patimokkha, mokkha. Now, the Patisampata describe these 7 qualities from renunciation to joy are evolved in arising the cessation of concentration, upachara samadhi, for pure insight practitioners, sukha vipassaka. The first jhana, the second, the third, and the fourth, the sphere of infinity, akasanyasa ayatana. The sphere of infinity of consciousness, vijnana achayatana. The sphere of nothingness, the fear of neither perception nor non-perception, and the 10 kasina meditation. The concentration on the 10 reflection, anusati, and the concentration on the 10 stages of decay, asubha, and the concentration on the 32 aspects of mindfulness of breathing. Concentration is followed by wisdom, which discerns all attributes of that different states of concentration as impermanent, subject to dukkha and not self. Here the commentaries presents a similar explanation for the first way of practice. A person first develops concentration, either access concentration or attainment concentration. He then reflects on that level of concentration along with accompanying mental factors as impermanent, etc., until there is a noble path attained, Ariyamaga. Tranquility preceded by insight. The Buddhadhamma explains, initially a person uses vipassana to see things as impermanent, subject to stress and not self. Then he lets go of all the qualities and manifests vipassana, concentration. And this letting go becomes the new object of meditation. The mind then becomes one-pointed and concentrated. The commentaries elaborate, a person has not yet generated samatha, but he or she discerns that universal characteristics of impermanence. In the 5 skandha of clinging, upatana skandha, when insight is complete, letting go of all factors of insight becomes the object of meditation. The mind becomes one-pointed, concentrated, that leads to path attainment. It says that whichever of these two ways of practice, samatha or vipassana, the person follows, tranquility precedes by insight, or insight preceded by tranquility. Tranquility and insight must always arise side by side at the attainment, at the moment of the path of attainment, of arihatship. This is so that because samatha and vipassana are essentially equivalent to the 8 factors, the 8 factors of the Noble Path. Insight equals right view, sammatiti. Right intention, sammasankappa. Samatha comprises all the remaining 6 factors. These 8 factors arise naturally together at the moment of attaining a noble realm, Arya Bhumi. Tranquility and insight in tandem, so vipassana and samatha at the same time. The Buddhadhamma explains, a person develops tranquility and insight in tandem in 16 ways. One of these ways is the practice of samatha, and the other one is the practice of vipassana, led to the identical object of meditation, aramana. For example, when one abandons restlessness, the mind becomes concentrated and cessation becomes the object of awareness. At the same time, by abandoning ignorance, insight arises. Cessation becomes the object of awareness. In this way, tranquility and insight work together as an equal basis. Some passages claim that although there is cooperation between tranquility and insight, this does not mean that samatha and vipassana arise simultaneously, since it is not possible to contemplate conditioned phenomenon while the mind is one-pointed in jhana. These passages state that these 2 ways of concentration act as a pair insofar that insight follows from a person's level of concentration of attainment, and equally to the next level of concentrative attainment, relies on one's previous levels of insight. A person enters the first and exits the first, contemplates the conditioned nature of the first, enters the second, exits the second, and contemplates the conditioned nature of the second jhana, enters the third, etc., until he exits from and contemplates the conditioned nature of the sphere, neither perception nor non-perception, which is the 4th, the sphere of nothingness. An important example of this explanation is an account of Venerable Sariputra, who developed tranquility and insight at the same time, from the first jhana to the attainment of the path and fruit of arihatship. The way of practice when the mind is misled by higher states of mind. The Pati Sampati Magga explains, when a person reflects on the three characteristics, lakkhana, anicca, dukkha, anatta, and the five aggregates or skandhas, rupa, vedana, sanya, vedana, sankhara, vijnana, sanya. The five aggregates, the following mind states may arise: radiance, knowledge, bliss, serenity, joy, determination, balance, effort, careful attention, equanimity, and devotion. The practitioner here believes that the radiance, for example, is the higher state of mind. He believes that he has attained path and fruit, or Nibbāna. Thinking in this way causes restlessness, and then 10 states of mind are not seen as they really are, as impermanent, subject to stress and non-self. Wise discernment of these 10 mind states causing the mind to waver leads to a settled, clear, and concentrated mind. When this wisdom, one is not carried away by these mind states. The heart will be pure and still with one meditation, while neither be misguided nor impaired. The path can be subsequently arise. It refers to the higher states of mind as 10 impurities of insight, vipassana nupa kilesa, which arise in those people whose insight practice is still weak, because these qualities are exceptional, have not been experienced before. Practitioners are likely to believe that they have attained path and fruit. This misunderstanding leads them to deviate from the way of insight. They abandon their meditation practice while delighting in the states of mind. The correct way of practice is to recognize the true nature of these mental states while they arise. They are impermanent, conditioned, dependent, arisen, subject to decline. They do not belong to us. They are not who we are. I am not this, this is not mine. Or we can't identify with it. By not being overly excited by these mental states, attachment to them wanes. A person is then able to practice correctly until reaching path and fruit. According to the commentaries, there are two principal ways of practice: insight preceded by tranquility, and tranquility preceded by insight. The remaining two ways of practice are simply extensions of these former two. The third way of practice of tranquility and insight in tandem is a subdivision of the first way of practice. The fourth way of practice is applied in special circumstances, with specific problems arise by practice in the first three ways. It is a strategy for solving these problems arising in practice. These two principal ways of practice are probably the origin of two concentration techniques enumerated in the commentaries: the vehicle of tranquility, samatha yana, of the samatha yanika, one who uses tranquility as a vehicle, and the vehicle of insight, vipassana yana, of vipassana yanika, one who uses insight as a vehicle. The samatha yanika practice tranquility first and insight later. Generally speaking, the tranquility can simply be access concentration, upachara samadhi, or it can be referred to attainment cessation, appana samadhi, of the four jhanas. The commentaries refer to more restrictive meaning. For someone who has attained the jhanas, they claim that the way of practice described by Gautama Buddha, quoted at the beginning of this section, that the destruction of asavas occurs in the dependence of the first jhana, etc., belongs to samatha yanika. The one who uses insight as a vehicle is also called a sutta vipassana yanika, one who practices pure insight as a vehicle. This refers to those who develop insight without having previously developed concentration. When they have correctly contemplated the true nature of things, the mind becomes peaceful and concentrated, arises automatically. At first, the concentration may be momentarily. Khanika Samadhi, which is the lowest level of concentration required for subsequent insight practice, as confirmed by this passage. Without momentary concentration, insight cannot function. Someone who begins with temporary concentration and then practice insight is also classified as one who uses the vehicle, vipassana yanika, because everyone experiences temporary concentration when the mind is settled in the activity or due to conductive environment. As concentration becomes naturally stronger through insight, it may develop into access concentration, upacharaya samadhi, concentration on the verge of jhana. Finally, at the moment of realizing magga and phala, fruit and path, concentration is well established at attainment, cessation, concentration. One reaches at least the first jhana. This accords with the principle mentioned earlier, that a person realizing the noble realm must be accomplished in both tranquility and insight. When those who use tranquility as vehicle to attain arihatship, they are divided into two kinds. Those liberated by wisdom, panya vimutta, and those liberated both ways, upadopaka vimutta. The former are those who have attained jnana, not higher than the fourth. The latter are those who have attained a formless jhana or higher, up to the extinction of perception and feeling. Those who use insight as a vehicle and those who attain arihatship are classified as panya vimutta. And the commentaries assign a special name for them, sukha vipassaka, dry insight practitioners. It's divided into arihats into 10 kinds, listed from the highest to the lowest. Those liberated in both ways and accomplished an extinction of perception and feeling. Liberated in both ways and accomplished in the sphere of neither perception or non-perception. Liberated in both ways and accomplished in the sphere of nothingness. Liberated in both ways and accomplished in the sphere of infinite consciousness. Liberated in both ways and accomplished in the sphere of infinite space. And those liberated by wisdom, panya vimutta, liberated through wisdom and accompanied with the fourth jhana, liberated through wisdom and accompanied the third jhana, liberated through wisdom and accomplished the second jhana, liberated through wisdom and accomplished the first jhana, liberated through wisdom as dry insight practitioners. So Maha Moggallana was liberated in both ways, and at the same time, while Shariputra was liberated in both ways through wisdom and one of the four jhanas. The first 9 kinds of arihats use tranquility as a vehicle. Their contemplative accomplishments occur before practicing insight. The 10th kind of arihat uses insight as the vehicle.